Sinaju Stein. Alrighty. Man, my camera is really off center of my desk, isn't it? Can I... Oh shit. Fix that. That's better. Look at that cockeye ass angle though. That's better. That's much better. Does my head show up? Only if I lean way too far forward. Okay. Oh, I wonder what I sound like. Oh my goodness. If I'm fast enough to get my ears on. Only if I lean way too far forward. Okay. Oh, I wonder what I sound like. Oh my goodness. If I'm fast enough to get my ears on. Only if I lean way too far forward. Oh, I wonder what I sound like. Oh my goodness. If I'm only if I lean way too far forward. Okay. Oh, I wonder what I sound like. Oh my goodness. If I'm fast enough to get my ears on. Only if I lean way too far forward. Hello, hello. Haha. There is a. Whoa. I maxed it out. There is a fucking mute button on my microphone. I didn't even know it, dude. Fuck. Oh my goodness. Okay. Oh, Jesus. It's always something. Fucking mute button on my microphone. I didn't even know it, dude. Fuck. Oh my goodness. Okay. Oh, Jesus. It's always something. Okay. So, I am, trying to figure out what exactly I want to do here. This can all go slightly more out of the way. This needs to go in the garbage because this is a bomb. It was an unprotected lithium-ion cell. That is currently in use. You can go right there. Alright, all of you. What do I want to do with all of you? Well, I couldn't be heard earlier, but I was talking about how this kit doesn't seem like a normal kit. Like this is really heavy, and these colors are like really. I don't know, everything seems really matte compared to what I'm used to. It looks really interesting. So these are my two N's, two D's, two H's, P1 and P2 are part of the same. Uh-oh, I'm bending something. He's caught. Oh, he's incredibly caught. Okay, he's uncaught. P1 and 2. K can go in that stack. F1 and F2. And go right there. Yo, we have a... Man, that means nothing I was talking about earlier made it through. But, we have real hands. These will, I'll stick them under right there. That's the only red. I'll be able to find that when I want it. That's the only clear. I'll be able to find that when I want it. I have two L's. I will stick them over here with the F's. G1 and 2. Look how matte these are. Like, they don't look matte because the light's shining right on top of them, but the plastic shine is really low on them. Really, really low. I know it doesn't look that way on the camera because I'm looking at it, but plastic shine is really low. Here's my A. You see my head right there. E. Gun here. I looks to be like strictly weapon parts. A and B. I'll stick A and B together and I'll stick them over here. And also I was saying that I've never seen this type of light gray on a kit before. It's really pretty. Really unique looking. Looks like those the elephant gray cars. Oh my goodness. Showing off the Sinaju Stein as well as the MSN00, the RGZ 95, so the Hyaku Shiki. The RGM 89 Dew EWAC unit. That just looks like a really funky Jigen. I haven't seen Char's Counterattack, which I know is what the Sinaju is from. So I'm not there yet in the story. I'm still on Zeta. I have you. I will never get you. I think you're ugly. And I will never get the unicorn because I tried to build a unicorn once. And it was destroyed on accident. It was destroyed by a pet, actually. And I was so miserable building that fucking unicorn that I didn't care. Well, I was upset about the money loss. And I would have like finished it because it cost money. But overall, fuck that thing. Oh, I forgot somebody. E2. Little wreck. Oh, okay. B, K, and C. I only assume C was this clear thing. Yep. B, I put with A. And then K is one of these. It's this guy. I'm not sure. I'll have to look in a second. Yeah. You were K, correct? You were in fact K. So K, 15 and 26. Yeah, I'm just killing time waiting to pick the girlfriend up though. I got her a job working where I work. And she is on night shift, same as me. So I can't remember if I said this while my headphones were while my mic was messed up or not. I don't know if I said this after I got myself unmuted, but she works thirds like me, but on an offset schedule. I'm Sunday to Thursday, whereas she is Monday night to Friday night. And I really miss having her around here at nights, or 2 nights out of the week rather. So I might start doing that more often. Or doing this more often rather, I mean. I don't know how to add part of me wonders if I should like add tags to this stream or whatever. Oh shit, he's got bits on him still. I actually haven't had any time to sit down and work on a Gundam in some time. So I'm probably going to be a little rusty and should take my time. But I've never been a time taker. Okay, C2 and C1. Here's a tip for you guys if you have God hands or any other like ultra fine finishing nippers like I'm using here. Clear pieces will mess your blade up. Not in one go, but it's like in Minecraft where you use your tool on the wrong thing and it takes like 5 durability off of it instead of 1. Yeah, so finishing nippers are not going to make a goddamn bit of difference on clear parts. They're either going to come out perfect or they're going to come out shitty. And it doesn't matter what you do. Is there undergating on this? I don't want to clip something I'm not supposed to be clipping. I don't see anything about undergating. Okay. It's a monkey ball. I feel really bad if the pilot's black and I just dropped that joke. Oh, okay. Oh. My whole ass fucking head's been in the camera this whole time. Oh well. Dude, you're killing me. Why won't you stay up there? My camera setup is ghetto as fuck, and I fully admit that, but I really, at the same time, would like it if it would do better. Go beyond your limits. No. Cocksucker. I swear to God, I'm gonna super glue it in place one day. I swear I am. You know what? I'm gonna go get the hot glue gun. Let's fix the fucking camera. I don't know if I can get the hot glue gun right now. It is in someone's bedroom who is sleeping. So let me just see here. What can I do to make you not such a colossal piece of shit? What if I do that? What if I loosen that? Ho ho. Ho 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 ho. Yeah, what if I just go ahead and do all... Oh! How do I tighten you down? I don't know how to make her tight. How are you ripping off? It's fucking Velcro. Shit's supposed to be magic. Jesus Christ. I've never seen anything Velcro related give this much trouble. God damn, dude. Okay. That is better. That is actually a lot better. And I don't need to hot glue anything. Okay. This is so much better. We're so back. Okay. Man, I just keep stepping away from this fucking stream. But I mean, what do you want me to do, man? I can tilt it enough to show off the art and not spill it. It needs more. Notice how the viscosity is different than water. That's how I drink this shit. I am a solid sludge enjoyer. Okay. I'm gonna go refill this, and then satisfying sound. I'm gonna go refill this, and I'm gonna have another seat. I will actually start playing a video and actually get to work. See that? Even the foam's tinted brown. That's some good sludge. Alright. I'm going to flip a coin for what video I listened to. But I'm between 3 videos. Okay. Heads, I listen to entertainment. Tails, I listen to an old scary story that its creator won't get mad that I'm streaming it. Tails? Should I go best 2 out of 3? That's the real question. Tails again, wouldn't matter. Okay, listen to a scary story. I'll do Tales from a Lonely Broadcast Station. What the fuck? It's been a year or so since I've listened to it.
Hey there, kids. It's me, Mr. Creepypasta, voice of
goodness.
from Accounts from a Lonely Broadcast Station. And before I get started on tonight's compilation, I just wanted to let you know, Accounts from a Lonely Broadcast Station.
This is me talking over the video to see if I'm audible over it.
Book 1. Hey there, kids. It's me, Mr. Creepypasta, voice of
goodness.
from Accounts from a Lonely Broadcast Station. And before I get started on tonight's compilation, I just wanted to let you know, Accounts from a Lonely Broadcast Station.
This is me talking over the video to see if I'm audible over it.
Is the first in a long book series.
I'm perfectly audible over it.
Greatly upon the audio that you're
This is accounts from a lonely broadcast station. All Seasons Part 1 from Mr. Creepypasta, and there are additional voices in this, but Mr. Creepypasta is a couple characters in it. I am going to rewind it 24 seconds to start from the beginning, but it is by Kel Byron. Yes, it is by Kel Byron. It's available on Amazon.com, including this recordable. This recording, I believe, is available on Amazon, or maybe following seasons are available on Audible. But the book itself is available on Amazon, and it's a nice little creepy story. And I hope no one involved in its creation minds that I'm about to listen to it on a stream. Go listen to Mr. Creepypasta. Listen to Mr. Creepypasta and the Dark Somnium. There you go. There's the plug that makes this okay in my mind.
On the new book in paperback or on Kindle. Hey there, kids. It's me, Mr. Creepypasta, voice of Daniel from Accounts from a Lonely Broadcast Station. And before I get started on tonight's compilation, I just wanted to let you know, Accounts from a Lonely Broadcast Station is available now on Amazon, written by Kel Byron. Book 1 is the first in a long book series and expands greatly upon the audio that you're about to hear now. If you want to get your hands on the new book in paperback or on Kindle, you can using a link in the description down below, or you can actually check your local Barnes & Noble. And now, on to tonight's story.
I only just started working this new job, and already it warrants keeping some kind of online journal. The internet up here isn't so great, but now and again, when I stand in just the right spot, I'm able to get a signal. It probably sounds ridiculous that I'd have so much trouble, considering that I work at a broadcast station where you would imagine it's downright necessary to have contact with the outside world. Well, in these last 3 weeks I've been here, I feel more out of contact than ever. Let me be frank with you all. It's pretty lonely and boring up here sometimes, and other times it's absolutely fucking bonkers. But during those days when it's dull and painfully slow, I think I need some kind of outlet to talk and tell my stories. That's why I've chosen this outlet, so that I can tell you all what it's like up here. Right now, I'm sitting next to the wall by the bathroom. The only spot I can get a tiny bit of Wi-Fi today. My butt is cold, my back is sore, but it's better than not having any internet connection at all. My name is Evelyn. It's an old lady name, I know. I'm 24, and I have a degree in journalism, but the best I could do with it right now was apply for a radio DJ position. 3 weeks ago, I started working at a broadcast station that sits 50 feet above the ground. It's on a hill between an old rural town and a long, sparsely inhabited woodland. It's a surreal, lonely, and sometimes maddening place to be. If you live here, which I'm almost sure none of you do, I'm probably the only station you can listen to. The town is nestled between green-covered mountains, but the signal reaches far enough for travelers to hear sometimes. If you pass through a very long stretch of road next to the woods, maybe taking a piss by the trees after passing the rest stop that's been without plumbing for 10 years, maybe you've heard my voice or listened to a couple of songs. There's nothing else for miles, and somehow our town doesn't even pick up the tiniest signal from anywhere else. We play a bit of every genre of music to keep everyone in the town happy. By we, I mean myself and the owners of the place who put me here. I'm the only radio DJ working right now. I know a few of you are probably thinking how this place stays running with only one DJ, and I'll tell you, I live here. Since I got the job, I also received a back room inside the station with a mattress, a fridge, and the basics you would expect from a one-room apartment. At midnight, the radio plays an automatic playlist for 6 hours so that I can sleep, though I've been known to wake up several times in the night just to check how the broadcast is going. Living on site was a part of the deal that many others would probably reject, but it works for me. I lost my home recently, but that's another story for another post. What I'm trying to illustrate is that I've been working alone without more than a few 5-minute conversations this entire time. And because I'm the only DJ, obviously there aren't many things involved aside from playing music, sharing the weather forecasts, warning the locals about emergencies, and talking about a bit of local news. Calls happen so infrequently that sometimes I easily forget that anyone is even listening at all. But all that aside, I did say that things are a little maddening around here, didn't I? I imagine what some would think. It's a pretty remote place, only one corner store and one tiny diner for 50 miles. Woods all around us, and it would be expected if I said we had some backwoods mischief makers roaming around. That's not it, though. Last week, the same song played on the radio for over an hour. I don't mean it repeated over and over and I couldn't turn it off, like some technical difficulty. It simply never ended. I even remember the song. It was Unchained Melody, and I knew as I listened that it had never been 75 minutes long. There were no calls of complaints, and after almost 80 minutes of listening to the song seamlessly repeat its chorus as if it had been composed that way, I was finally able to simply switch to the next piece on the list. Not before getting a call, though. It was the first call I had gotten in this station. On the other end of the phone was the voice of an old man, frail and hoarse. He simply croaked, "Thank you." His words were agonizingly slow, painful, dry. It almost sounded like he had a mouth full of dust, and I could swear I could smell the mustiness from over the phone. He hung up before I had a chance to say anything to him, but I'm almost glad. I'm not sure he had the energy for another word. Another time, just this last Wednesday, 5 birds killed themselves on the window. That is to say, they smacked against it so hard, they just dropped. I know for a fact that this tower isn't invisible. It's an eyesore against the view of the trees, really. But on that same day, just minutes apart from one another, 5 different birds hit the glass of my broadcasting room head first, hard enough to, well, die. All in the same general spot, too. I'm surprised they didn't leave a crack. They did, however, leave a bit of a mess that bothered me for the rest of the day until I finally climbed onto the fire escape with a rag like some kind of old-timey window washer. We also have interesting rules. There's a board near my desk with a list of guidelines I've been told I have to follow. Rule number 1. Never let the radio go silent for more than a few minutes. If the broadcast is down due to technical error, activate the bell. Note that I still don't know what the bell is, other than the fact that there's a button on the wall labeled as such. it remains a tempting mystery. Rule 2. Take care of the equipment, don't let anything break. Rule 3. Any suspicious calls must be recorded. Never tape over a recording. And Rule 4. When the fog rolls in, do not leave the building. Do not open the door. Sound the emergency broadcast. It struck me as very odd that my employer would have such a strict rule about the fog. I mean, after all, this is the main reason why they insisted on hiring someone who could stay at the station 24/7, at least until they get me a coworker. It seemed out of left field, so specific and yet unrelated to any of my duties. I was surprised the fog was enough of an issue to warrant an emergency alarm, really, but only a couple of days into my job, I saw it for myself. On my second day of work, I was put to the test of getting the emergency broadcast out as soon as I could. You see, the entire room I work in has windows all around so that I can see outside in the woods. I assumed at first that this was just for the natural light, but now I'm thinking it's more of a watch. A fire watch, a fog watch, whatever kind of watch. I figure if I'm positioned so high in the trees, it must be for a good reason. I'd been switching between songs, getting ready to introduce an old classic by Fleetwood Mac, when my eyes caught a rolling cloud of white on the horizon. I let the song start, turning off my microphone and rushing to the window, expecting an avalanche coming this way. It seems absurd, I know, but that's exactly what it looked like from a distance. It looked like an avalanche, rolling white and gray, moving like ocean waves as it spilled over its own form and moved closer and
my
closer.
Fucking hair.
Fog didn't walk, did it? The fog's movements were so perfectly executed that it reminded me of steps.
What if I sit
It
a little
undulated
different?
as if its motions were being controlled by
Ow.
weight. I almost expected it to make a sound, but that's a stupid thought to have. I didn't watch for too long, slightly startled by the thickness of the fog on its way towards the town. I did just as I was instructed to do and returned to my station, killing the music immediately and taking up the microphone. This is an emergency broadcast for Pines Haven. I was speaking straight from a script, using my most stern, clear-spoken voice. This is a heavy fog warning. I repeat, this is a heavy fog warning for Pines Haven. Return to your homes immediately and wait for further instructions. Please lock all doors and windows. I furrowed my brows at my own words. This was extreme for fog, I thought, but it wasn't going to creep into anyone's house and commit a breaking and entering, was it? I chalked it all up to paranoia. Perhaps it was an unnecessary precaution we were obligated to make for some legality reason, but it still sent a chill up my spine. I turned my microphone off, leaving the music off as well. As much as I loved a bit of Stevie Nicks, it was too interested watching the fog to pay attention to the silence. My eyes were fixed downward. This insanely thick bank of misty-ass fog had almost gotten all the way to the station and was curling around the bottom of my tower. It didn't quite reach where I was way up in the air, however, wisps of clouds still drifted in front of the huge, stretching window that showed me the entirety of the forest. I could see just how far this fog went. It must have gone pretty damn far because it was just about the only thing I could see aside from the tops of a few of the tallest pine trees. And those tall pine trees were moving. I thought it was an illusion at first, brought on by the churning waves of fog beneath, but I was wrong about that. The trees that I could see were shaking, moving from side to side briefly and one at a time. It was almost violent, as if they were being pushed. The most ridiculous thought popped into my head as I realized what it looked like. It looked like something was on its way towards me, crashing through the forest and hitting the trees as it went. The motions were serpentine. I watched one tree shake, then another to its right, then another to the tree's left. All the while, it came closer. I watched all of this with more curiosity than anything else. Judging by the speed, I was about ready to panic at any moment, when I suddenly heard something that startled me even more. It was an unfamiliar sound.
The phone rang. I ran to the desk and picked up the phone quickly, all the while my eyes continued to stare out the window. Hell, Evelyn! It was my boss on the other end, and he sounded furious. I could almost hear the spit flying from his mouth with each word.
Turn the radio back on now!
Sir, there's a fog emergency. I didn't think...
I know. Turn the radio back on.
He hung up the phone before I had a chance to ask questions, but it's a good thing I didn't get that time. I glanced upwards, eyes fixed out the window to see the fog was growing higher and higher. The treetops had all completely disappeared, and the window was nearly covered completely. I swore, in that moment, I saw something in the murky gray mass slowly pulsing on the other side of the glass. A shape. It was dark, moving shape that was too concealed within the mist to give any semblance of detail. I didn't wait around to see what happened next. I followed my boss's orders, slammed my ass back into the chair, shoved my headset back over my ears, and turned up the music again. Within moments, the signal was live once more, and some Bit by the Eagles was playing through my speakers and every radio in town as well. I breathed a sigh of relief. What was I so relieved about? As far as I knew, nothing was on the line just because I had forgotten to turn the music back up, other than perhaps my job. There was still a sense of discomfort, however, as I turned my eyes back up to the window. The fog was still there, but it was creeping further and further back down into the woods. In moments, it had sank beneath the bottom of the window and out of sight. The pine trees came back into view, and then, before my very eyes, I watched the horizon appear as the bank of fog slowly dissipated and moved on through. Strangely, I got that same feeling that I was looking at something solid and organic again. Well, the fog stopped after that. I didn't have to make another emergency broadcast, and it's been about 2 weeks since. Now things are just a normal level of weird. I get a strange call now and then, usually someone from the town I don't recognize saying some gibberish message I can't understand, or now and then a song in my music lineup begins to play backwards. Once or twice I swear I've heard someone talking in the room, even with headphones on, but it's a muffled blur of noise.
Damn, dude, come on.
Yesterday, I saw a bird perch on the edge of the window staring at me, and I swear it was human-like, but unless there's some weirdo out there crossing bird DNA with human genetics, it's probably just me being overly paranoid. I think that happens when you've been alone for a really long time. I have a lot more to talk about, and I'm sure in the following days and weeks I'll have more stories and things to write down that might be of interest, but honestly, right now, my butt is starting to hurt something awful from sitting on this cold floor next to the bathroom. The 20-minute music block is almost over, and I'll have to go through the local news. Maybe, if you're driving through looking for a place to stop, you might hear me. Oh, and if you are, don't bother with the rest stop. The plumbing is still broken, and their coffee tastes like gasoline. Well, probably is gasoline. This is Evelyn from 104.6 FM. Have a safe night, and be careful out there. Have you ever met a person who was just too much person? I'm talking about one single human who sucks the energy out of you, as if they were an entire bustling big city crowd somehow condensed into one body. I think we've all met at least one person like this before, the type that makes you wonder how they fit such a big attitude inside themselves without popping like a cheap dollar store balloon. I met a guy like this. He's sitting in the room with me right now. I'm sure you're all here to read about the more unusual things happening up here at the radio station, and believe me, I have some downright creepy shit to tell you about. But first, I need to introduce you to my new coworker, who just started this morning. Today was his first day, might be his last day too. His name is Daniel. Daniel is a lot. He's loud, full of motion, and may genuinely think he's Bob Barker in the flesh. My boss dropped by during my second week here and noted that I looked weary. He knew why. I sleep 4 hours a night if I'm lucky, and haven't gone outside in 3 weeks. Dan will be your part-timer, my boss said.
Let him take a few responsibilities so that you can get a little fresh air. The folks in town will take a new voice.
As hesitant as I was, I knew what he meant. I could use the extra help, and those at home could use a little conversation to add spice to their listening experience, but I knew right away that Dan and I mix like oil and water. I decided to let him try his hand at announcing, but the first time he turned on his mic and heard him belt out, "Good morning, and would you look at that sunshine?" I couldn't help but give him a stare of both disbelief and the fear that if he keeps bellowing like that, he'll give every old person in town a heart attack on the spot. He'd cut our population in half. But as much as his over-the-top radio personality irks me, I kind of feel bad for the guy. Not because he tries too hard or because he seems to have some deep-seated need for attention. That's all true, but it's not why I feel bad. I feel bad because, well, right now, he's sitting across the room from me in a fetal position, shivering with blood running out of both ears and one nostril, weeping. As far as first days go, Dan had a weird one. At 8 o'clock in the morning, he arrived. I think he was surprised to see that he wasn't getting some cute, spunky thing as his coworker, but rather my tired self with a messy braid and a hoodie filled with 2 warm granola bars that I had forgotten about, but would be delighted to find later on. At 9 o'clock, I let him give the weather forecast, and he did so with enthusiasm. Then at 10 o'clock, I had to explain to him that the bird on the window with human-looking eyes has been hanging around for days now and probably isn't up to anything. It's just ugly, I reassured him. At 11 o'clock, he told me that there was some creepy human sobbing coming from inside the bathroom sink. I was a bit shaken that he hears it too, but shrugged it off by telling him that it doesn't excuse him from washing his hands. Then at noon, exactly on the hour, we got a caller. This was a very, very unusual. Of all the things considered weird, the weirdest was the reminder that other people actually live here. I stared at the screen for the longest time trying to figure out whether or not to answer the call, but ultimately decided that it would be ridiculous not to. "Hello, caller, we've got you on the line." I spoke in a soft, mature radio voice. The line was quiet for a moment, but I could hear a bit of static and the slightest hint of a breath.
G. Who was G again?
Yes, Evelyn. It was a woman's voice, probably about 70 years old. She sounded as if she was shivering, which I assume was just jitters from being live on the air. "My name is Rose. I had something I'd like to tell you."
G12.
"Of course, Rose. What's on your mind today?"
H.
"Well, I've had a bout of strange dreams, dear, and I'm wondering if anyone else has had the same.
There we go. G12.
You see, last night I had a dream in which the forest split in two, like the parting of the Red Sea, dear. I hope you know the story of Moses, don't you?" I spared a glance towards Dan, my lips curved upward in a tiny smile mixed with a grimace as if to say, "Oh boy, here we go." He returned it with a witty grin of his own, glad that I was the lucky one to answer. Sure I do, Rose. What happened next?" "Well, the ground was open and something was rising out of it. It blocked out the whole sky, you see. I can't even describe it, but it covered everything. The town and the sun, all that my eyes could see. The sound it made was a fearsome bellow that shook the whole earth, and then I woke up. You think that God lives in the forest, dear?" Dan apparently saw the expression on my face, unwilling to answer for fear of, well, offending or encouraging any other very zealous callers, and so he finally did something good for me and answered in my place. "That's an interesting dream, ma'am, but I think if God lived in the forest, he wouldn't give you a nightmare like that." He laughed, but his laugh was cut off by a snappy tone from the woman on the line. Well, he tried. "We're meant to be afraid of God, dear." Her voice sounded like a slither, like a hiss. For an old woman, she almost struck a bit of fear in me with that tone. "Besides, I wasn't talking to you." My grimace was gone, replaced by a furrowed brow of concern and a very, very obvious discomfort. I didn't like this conversation. It had gone from, oh boy, to, oh no, to, oh shit, very, very quickly. I had 3 weeks to get used to some of the weird mind tricks around this place, but this was different for me. This was real human conflict that I couldn't just blame on the stress of isolation. Rose's words and the way she said them bordered on malicious. That sweet, nervous, grandmotherly tone was gone, and suddenly I felt as if I were on the phone with someone who genuinely had ill will towards us both. I'm afraid it's time for the weather, Rose, but feel free to call back should you keep having those very interesting dreams. Thank you for calling, ma'am, and have a wonderful afternoon. I ended the call, then faced Dan with wide eyes while mouthing the words, block that number. I wish I could say that the weirdness ended then and there, but we're never so lucky. After the call from Rose, we had more calls. 2, and then 3, then 7, by the time 5 o'clock rolled around.
I can't tell if
They
I
were
have
all
this
very
in
similar.
properly.
People in town were recounting
This is
their
the first
dreams,
time
but they
gunpla
weren't all
instructions kinda
elderly
suck
people
ass.
talking about God or whatever eldritch abomination they saw rising out of the woods. I heard all types of people, all types of voices, young and old, some a little quirky, and others who seemed more skeptical. One caught me off guard.
I'm gonna move
I still
forward,
remember her words
assuming
perfectly.
that I have it in there right.
It was a young woman, maybe my age, and she sounded as if she was hesitant, but somehow still desperate to tell anyone about what she had seen. I saw a bird with human eyes, she told me. Right away, I was curious, as this was something a little too real on levels of weirdness. In a dream? No, the woman answered. There was a harsh intake of breath from the other side. I don't sleep anymore since it started perching at my windows. All of them. Windows that weren't even there before? Sorry, I shouldn't have called. Before I had a chance to say anything, she hung up the phone. It's difficult trying to think of the best words to explain how I felt after that phone call. Regret, I think. I felt somehow responsible for the sorrow and hesitance in her voice, the way she saw some need to apologize for telling me what she saw. There was a deep pit of dread in my stomach. I hope she's okay, whoever she is, and that she figures out where all those extra windows came from. I'll admit, I had to take a break from writing this in order to tend to my new coworker. I had said that he had a rough first day. Rough is a bit of a lax word. At first, he was only a bit spooked about the general weirdness up here, but after what happened with our final phone call of the day, there was enough to warrant actual concern for his physical health. I let Dan take over all the controls while I just left long enough to make a sandwich, realizing that it was almost 9 o'clock at night and I had yet to feed my flesh prison the entire day. Human bodies, they're obnoxiously needy. He had a call come in, which I realized only because I heard him answer it. I didn't even hear it ring. It was late and a strange time for calls, but I figured if it was someone being a creep, at least it would be entertaining to see how he handled it. However, Dan was silent after that first initial greeting. Seconds ticked by, and he said nothing. Finally, when I stepped out of the tiny employee kitchen with a peanut butter sandwich in hand, I witnessed my coworker throwing the headphones off of his head and letting out a shriek as he covered his ears. His eyes were wide and impossibly bloodshot. Veins were popping on his forehead and neck, and his moppy dark hair flew back and forth as he shook his head before dropping to his knees. I could see blood dripping down from his nose over his top lip and his teeth, which were bared in a pained grimace. Through the hair at the sides of his head, I saw dark trickles of blood streaming over his hands as if something inside of his ears had burst. I dropped my sandwich with a few cuss words exclaimed as I rushed over to him, grabbing one of his wrists in an attempt to see the damage. He didn't want to move his hands, and I didn't blame him. With that much blood, I'd be afraid too. His eyes blearily scanned over my face, and I asked loudly if he could hear me. He simply gave me a dumbfounded expression and whimpered pathetically, as if even more upset over the fact that he could only read my lips. Oh God. His ears were totally shot. The music continued to play, however, with the microphone still running and his screaming likely caught on the broadcast. I made the decision to keep the rest of his struggle private by marching over to the console and turning off both microphones. I let the music run automatically and returned to his side where he had fallen over and was now lying with his legs curled up, shivering and traumatized. He looked at me, tried to mouth a few words, but didn't get far before his eyes rolled back and he was out cold in a dead faint. I sat across from him for a long time. My eyes glanced over at the sandwich, which was already being feasted upon by some very fortunate ants that probably thought a merciful god had rained down this gift from the heavens. I left it there, not wanting to disappoint them. That's when I found the granola bars in my pocket. Half melted, but still a very happy surprise. Maybe I was my own merciful god. After a while of watching over Dan and writing up a bit of my day, I noticed him finally stir. He was startled, gasping for breath as if waking from a nightmare, eyes darting around the room until he saw me cross the space to approach him. I got down to his level, lying on my side so that he could see my face clearly and understand what I asked him. We were on the floor side by side, like two kids at the shittiest slumber party ever, not even one pillow to spare. Your face is bloody. You think you can walk to the bathroom? He nodded. Want to sleep on an actual mattress? He hesitated, then nodded again. I'd already called an ambulance while he was unconscious, but I knew it would take a while to get here. Our town didn't exactly have a hospital, and anyone who's had to drive around the mountains knows the chore that trip is. Until then, he could rest on the mattress in my employee apartment and sleep off whatever shit he was going through. I was surprised that he got up on his feet as easily as he did. That is to say, without falling over at all. Although his balance was worse for wear. One would suspect as much with two newly injured ears. I let him sit down on the toilet as I helped clean his face and underneath his ears, letting him wash his own hands. Can you hear me at all? I asked, now that we were in a quiet, noise-free room. It took him a moment before he finally spoke up, but his voice was a hoarse whisper that he probably couldn't even pick up. A little, he said, then smirked with a sad excuse for a chuckle. You're friendlier when I can't hear you well. I would have slugged him in the shoulder for that one, but I just laughed and let it slide. It felt weird taking care of someone else. I didn't think I was a maternal type of person, but I found myself being as gentle as possible with his bloodied face, with genuine care for his comfort. He was cleaned up, all except for his ears, which were covered in what bandages we had on hand, and I helped him to the mattress so that he could lie down and rest. Damn, as far as first days go, his was probably the worst I could ever imagine. I really felt for the guy then. First, he was just annoying, but now that he was subdued, albeit in a terrible way, he wasn't so insufferable. As he laid down with a bit of a wince, I turned to leave, but not before he waved a hand towards me in a weak, sort of attention-grabbing slap to the arm. I heard it, he mumbled, the volume of his voice fluctuating but still difficult to make out. The color was drained from his face, and he took in a breath laced with an audible shiver. A bellow. God in the woods, like Rose said. My brow crinkled and I turned away, grabbing a thin, folded blanket from the top of a plastic shelving system and draping it over him. That wasn't some fearsome god, Dan. Just something really wrong with your headset. We'll fix you up, just get some rest. That's where Dan spent the rest of the evening. At least, until an ambulance came to pick him up. It took him damn long enough to get here. I decided to spend the night at my desk, watching the broadcast go without even putting my own headset on. After a while, it became a surreal experience, just watching the music play by itself and trying to imagine who out there was actually listening to it. Maybe I was the only one? It's crazy how I went from hating Dan to suddenly missing his presence now that I was alone and completely uninterested in sleep. And yeah, I know I lied to him. It wasn't his headset. Whatever he heard was very real. But I don't know. He's gone through enough without that to worry about too. It's after midnight now, and I heard a disturbing sound. The phone started ringing again. Someone was calling in. I took a deep breath. I took a deep, steady breath through my nose
and ignored it. This is Evelyn from 104.6 FM, and the strangest looking bird is still sitting at the edge of my window. I never knew that ear surgery was so simple. Not to say that it isn't a delicate and skilled process, of course, but when I got the call from Dan's mother, lovely woman by the way, she told me that with an outpatient surgery, they'd be able to decently repair one of his ears and possibly give him some partial hearing in the other. At the very least, they'd fix it up enough to avoid an infection. I suppose I always thought that the ear was such a small and intricate part of the body that fixing up those tiny, cramped caverns of bones and delicate vibrations would be a huge deal. A dangerous deal. Turns out, Dan got the surgery the morning after the incident with his headset and is recovering. They think he'll be able to hear well enough to stick around here and do his job, though he may need some hearing assistance once he fully heals. He won't be returning to work for a few days probably, and may not be wearing a headset for a long time, but while talking to his mother, I heard him in the background saying, "Is that Evelyn? Tell her I'm not done being her nuisance yet." So, I guess I've still got a part-timer? A nuisance part-timer? He's just taking a very early, very medicated vacation. While he's out, I've been here by myself, and god damn it, that bird will not leave! I noticed something while looking out the window between giving the forecast and playing a block of commercial-free music. It's building a nest. That little shit piece with its damn eyes is building a nest right in front of where I sit all day. Now, I like birds. I generally don't have trouble with any kind of wildlife, so long as it's not trying to pick a body part to run off with, but somehow, for whatever reason, the last thing I want is to see this bird create multiple mini versions of itself. I can just imagine tens of them lined up all around the window, staring at me from every direction, watching what I'm doing. I almost decided to go out there and try moving the nest down into the woods, but I don't want to leave the station unmanned for too long. Maybe I'll wait until Dan gets back and let him take over for a while so I can take that thing far, far away from the tower. I hate this fucking bird. Before I sat down in the morning, I cleaned myself up at the bathroom mirror. The sink was quiet. I know that should be a good thing, but I don't mean clanking pipes or clogged plumbing causing any sound. On Dan's first day, he said he heard the sobbing from down in the pipes, and it shook me a bit. I've heard it too, but I figured it was just me. I figured the isolation of being up here 50 feet in the air, and with no company except for the grocery delivery man, was starting to make me imagine human voices in places where they didn't really exist, but he heard it too. Honestly, I was a bit disappointed that it didn't continue the first time I noticed the eerie silence.
My phone went off.
I was going to try
be
to
my
convince
lovely girlfriend
Dan
on
that
lunch.
we had a colony of mole people living in the plumbing as soon as he got back, but that joke wouldn't solve the mystery.
See what she has to say to me. It was not my lovely girlfriend texting me? Huh. She should be on lunch any minute, though. That's strange.
At this point, humor is just about the only thing keeping me sane around here. But if you ask, did I think it was a ghost down there? A person?
Oh my goodness.
No, I didn't care. So long as it remained a sound and nothing else, it didn't matter where it came from. I forgot about it for a bit.
I stopped thinking about whatever was, or wasn't, rather, in the sink and went about my daily work. The skies were blue and clear, the air was chilly but warm for being in the mountains. All in all, things were boring. But I suppose I could use a boring day after watching my coworkers' eardrums simultaneously rupture the day before. I'll take a boring day over a bloody one. I sat down, putting my headset on and waiting for the automatic music block to come to an end. There were envelopes opened and stacked about with "Get Well Soon" cards placed in a line above the consoles. Word got out fast that Dan was undergoing a standard minor surgery, and I imagine that anyone listening that evening before who heard his pain screams was quick to hunt down the gossipers for information. At least 10 people in town sent cards straight to the station with the early morning mail. I set them in front of his chair like a cute surprise for when he came back. Even I ordered one for him too, but unfortunately the grocery delivery guy had accidentally been given a "Happy Birthday Grandma" card instead. I still signed it and put it up with the rest. It's the thought that counts.
Good morning, this is Evelyn McKinnon with 104.6 FM. I hope everyone is enjoying the sunny skies today. Daniel Esperanza will not be joining me this morning, but he would like to thank everyone for the kind well wishes and can't wait to return at the end of the week. Stay tuned for the 5-day forecast at 8:30 this morning, but until then, enjoy 30 minutes of uninterrupted music here on 104.6 FM.
I wasted most of the morning away. The Wi-Fi was close enough that I could sit near my desk and surf the web a little, looking for news to talk about. I was in a bored daze, looking at the clock, waiting for time to pass. The internet is too slow to play much video unless I'm in the mood for a good, long buffer, so most of the time, it was just spent staring at a dull screen. At noon, my eyes snapped to the side as a noise came through my earphones. It was the phone. Even while the music played, someone was calling in. I thought maybe it was a request, or maybe Dan's mother calling again. Apparently Daniel had said enough good things about me for her to invite me to her niece's wedding in June. Sweet woman. I made sure that the audio mixer wouldn't pick up the call or my voice with the music broadcast, and with a touch of hesitance, I allowed the voice to come through. "This is Evelyn at 104.6 FM. What can I do for you?" There was a loud gasp on the other end, then a shaking, shivering sob, and the sounds of a young woman breathing in through a stuffy nose. I recognized the sound. It was less muffled than it had ever been, more direct, more human. It was the same pattern of sobs I heard from inside the sink every day since I started, and the same one Daniel had heard as well. I felt a chilling sensation, like the sudden gust of wind you feel walking out into a blustery winter night from a warm building. It didn't hit me all at once, but traveled from the top of my head down my back and all the way to the tips of my toes. Every hair on my body stood on end,
22.
and every pore and freckle was like a stinging pinprick. And then the words began to come through.
K22, K20,
You have to
U120.
stop. She was still sobbing, still gasping and sniffling. She paused, and I assume it was to let me speak. "Are you all... Oh my god, stop making excuses!" She interrupted me, and all at once I became confused. Was she talking to me at all? "I'm so tired. This is my home. I wanted to help you, but you won't let me." I didn't respond. It was as if we were listening to only one half of a conversation, like a recording. Something about the voice sounded familiar to me, enough to make my stomach drop into a pit deep in my gut, but then again, I had heard it before, in the bathroom sink. Had I heard it anywhere else? "Please, let me help you. Please, you haven't had a single day since graduate." All at once, I ripped the headset off my ears, pushed my chair back, and left the device dangling on a cord like a pendulum off the side of the desk. It wasn't for lack of reason. I felt the most intense nausea erupt suddenly, stomach churning and mouth watering. No time at all to wonder if I'd be able to calm down or not. I rushed to the bathroom, with the call still going, that voice speaking and sobbing into the air. Vertigo struck as soon as the door was within reach, and those 3 steps to the toilet felt as if I were walking in a bright, spinning carnival tunnel. My legs buckled at the knees and I went crashing down, white knuckles gripping the edge of the toilet seat as I tried to drag myself towards it. My arm lacked the strength, but it was then that the nausea turned into something else. I was choking. Shit. If there was ever a time I could have a coworker there with me, this would be that moment. I lost my breath, and the vibrant colors that spun around me only grew more blinding, static in my vision as I prepared to lose consciousness. And then, with a desperate cough, I felt a sharp pain as something dislodged itself from my throat. My head hit the floor with a thud, but I found myself staring directly at the thing that had somehow gotten inside of my body. It was a stone. Just a stone. A brown speckled one, like the kind that you'd find out in the woods, like maybe on a hike or maybe from a riverbed. As far as things you could mysteriously choke on with no explanation, a stone seemed like a rather boring item. But as I looked at it, perhaps with sheer frustration that it had almost killed me, I wanted nothing more than to be rid of it. My arm shook as I pushed myself up, grabbing the stone in my fist. Without a second thought, I threw it into the toilet and flushed the handle, watching it disappear down the cyclone of water. It was then that I swore I heard a sniffle to my right, coming from deep down inside the pipes beneath the sink. "You can have it back." I wiped my face with my sleeve, then washed my hands thoroughly before returning to my desk. My headphones were still dangling off the edge of the table, swinging back and forth slowly. I picked them up, put them over my head once more, and was greeted with silence from the other line. The woman had hung up the phone. The sense of discomfort hasn't left. That bird hasn't left. What's worse is I saw it clicking its beak on the window, looking straight at me. It wants to come in. I know how crazy it sounds, acting like I know what a bird wants and is thinking, but this sparrow is too human not to be aware of its expression. Pleading, demanding eyes are staring constantly as I sit at my desk, only gone when it leaves to fill its nest. I'm not letting it in. There's a fog advisory for Thursday. It's only Tuesday as I write this, but I still find myself staring across the forest, expecting to see the hills of trees start to move. I expect to see it burst open. Where does the fog even come from? I'm imagining it now, drifting up from beneath the ground, rising into the air, and covering the town in the sun, all that my eyes can see. And the sound it might make, a fearsome bellow that shakes the whole earth. Shit, maybe I shouldn't have blocked Rose's phone number after all. This is Evelyn from 104.6 FM, and I just noticed a brown speckled stone sitting on the edge of the window. Class of 2017 written in white paint on its side. I don't know how it got there, but more importantly, who on earth fished that thing out of the goddamn toilet? I honestly never thought I'd dread a Thursday the way I did. It's a perfectly good day of the week, and rarely do you ever hear people complaining about how much they hate Thursdays. There's no, "Is Thursday over yet?" mugs out there next to the Monday ones. However, as the week drifted slowly by, all I could think about was the constant warning of another foggy day quickly approaching. On top of all that, my morning started with a script for a missing persons report. A woman named Jennifer Cook, age 25, had wandered into the woods in a supposed sleepwalking incident, and her status, for whatever reason, had been listed as, quote, "in extreme danger." I recognize her name. We were friends in college. One good thing did happen. Daniel decided resting was boring as hell and made the decision to return one day earlier than expected. Still recovering, but plenty well enough to pester me. I almost regretted to say it, but I missed the guy. I guess it's true that you don't always realize you've missed something until it's taken away from you, and even this insufferable pain in my ass was better than the absolute isolation. Beggars can't be choosers. I watched as his eyes lit up, seeing the "get well" cards that had been left on the side of his console. He snorted when he noticed the one I left for him. "Happy birthday, Grandma?" He laughed as he picked it up, opening the card to find no kind words or even a signature, but a doodle of him with 2 Beethoven-inspired ear trumpets duct taped to his head. What can I say? I was bored. "Thanks, Evelyn. You're a very thoughtful grandchild." After the morning weather broadcast, at which time he joined me to announce his return to the station, we turned off our microphones to catch up. I hardly believe it needs saying that catching up for us didn't only involve the mundane. He told me about his procedure in vivid detail, almost excitedly, and to be honest, I was very interested. Delicately, he tilted his head to either side to show the scars behind his ears and the surgical dressing still kept on the inside. It was no wonder he still spent most of his time trying to read my lips. Even if his ears had been successfully repaired, he couldn't hear a damn thing with cotton stuffed in there. Eventually, we exhausted talk of scalpels and stitches, and he asked me what sort of bizarre happenings he had missed while on his vacation. Sink is still acting up. The pipes were a little rusty the other day, though. I think that was making it a bit weepier than usual. Did you get any calls? I hesitated, but tried not to look too unwilling to answer. Rather, I pretended I was in thought, looking back at dull and completely unimportant memories before shaking my head. Not really. Just a couple of music requests. Some guy in town has a serious crush on Diana Ross.
Get this in
Daniel's
there.
eyes were fixed on my face, reading it far after my lips had stopped moving. I think the fact that I avoided his gaze completely was more of a telltale sign of secrecy than anything else. I didn't want to tell him about
I
the
guess
crying
like
woman
that.
over the phone, the rock that had been in my stomach, or any conversation all of that may stir. The feeling of unease that subject caused was so fuzzy, so confusing to me, that I had no desire to go tumbling down that rabbit hole by my own free will. That bird, though, I interrupted, just as he took in a breath to speak, bringing my knees up in my chair and kicking off from the desk to roll a few feet. I practically jumped out of the seat to stomp across the room, headset left abandoned, and a finger pointing out the window. Sure enough, my nemesis was picking at the nest it had built on a tree branch right at the window's edge. "You don't like the nest?" Daniel asked, as if there were any possible doubt of how I felt. "It's gonna have all its creepy-looking babies right in front of our broadcast room." I put my hands to the glass with an exasperated groan. But even as I knocked my fist against the
Gee, that
surface, that
was,
shitty little
one of
bird
these.
did not leave. It just
G2.
stared at me, face turned so that one human eye followed my movements. If its beak had the ability to move in a grin,
There's
I am
G1.
almost sure it would have been smirking at me. "I'm getting rid of it." "Hold up, I know it's weird looking, but you're not just going to kill it." "I'm not killing it," I corrected Daniel, returning to the desk to hang up my headphones properly. I leaned against the back of my abandoned chair, facing my coworker to explain my instructions. "I'm going out on the fire escape to grab the nest, and I'm taking it into the woods. I won't hurt it, I'll just make it a nest in a new spot. You need to take the controls while I'm gone, though." He couldn't wear his headset, but that didn't matter. So long as he could keep the music running on his own and avoid any lapses of silence while I was gone, the plan would be simple and effective. I still try to wrap my head around this feeling, urgency. I needed to get rid of that nest, and it
That
needed
was
to
these
happen
white
immediately.
tandems, right?
I had to leave the station in order to get to the fire escape. I know that completely defeats the
F1,
purpose of the fire
11,
escape, but
12.
it wasn't worth triggering the alarm just to save a few steps and explaining my stupid obsession to my boss while disarming it. That involved descending endless clanking stairs, downwards and downwards, until I had circled a 50-foot spiral of rusted metal to the cold cement floor. The exit sign no longer glowed, but the door's windows shone a tarnished yellow light from the overcast sky outside. When my shoes sank into the long grass, kicking up tiny pebbles in the dry dirt, I felt a sense of immense insignificance. The world felt big, and I felt small, suffocating somewhere in the middle of all that vast and limitless space. It was the first time in over a week I had felt the wind on my skin so directly, and something about standing in the open air failed to feel comforting. I didn't feel freedom. I felt violated, exposed. I felt like a newborn without guidance. I decided to make the job as quick as possible. I secured my flannel around my waist, holding onto either side of the fire escape as I climbed my way upwards. I spared a look out into the mountains, those rolling high hills of rocks and dirt covered in newly budding trees and evergreens. Looking at the horizon brought me stress. That stress formed a gnarled ball sitting in my stomach, kind of like a stone, really. I didn't need any more of those in my guts. "Okay, you feathered fuck." Once I was at the top, panting breathlessly in the absolute throes of exhaustion, I waved my hand to shoo the bird away. For once, it actually left, but that didn't bring me much comfort. It flew away from its nest without panic, as if it wasn't leaving because it feared me. It was simply moving out of the way to perch elsewhere, casually, as if to say, I'm only moving because I want to. I reached down over the metal bars to grab the nest, plucking it off the branch. Now, as much as I hate this bird, and as vocal as I've been about that fact, I couldn't bring myself to be rough with its nest. I held it with some level of tenderness, but still held my breath anxiously as I peered into the circular web of twigs and discarded animal furs. There were no eggs, but the nest wasn't empty. With a shudder of disgust and every single nerve in my body wanting to get that damn thing away from me as quickly as possible, I threw that nest as far as my arm would let me, wiping my hands on the waist of my shirt as I watched it fly into the trees. Inside that nest, nestled into the center like a beloved, delicate eggs, were 4 human fingers chewed off from the knuckle. They were young and slim, the nails painted in partially chipped red polish. It was then that I heard a slither behind me, scraping wet against the metal of the stairs. It was a sickening sound that only added to the chill I felt traveling up my arms and neck. I turned, ready to lock eyes with whatever creature had crawled out of the woods, and found a thick, dirt-covered vine that had grown all the way up the rusted beams and across the first step. I had seen a bird with human eyes, a sink with a human voice, but God forbid would this plant start personifying itself too. Eager to get off that fire escape and back into the station, I stepped over the muddy green appendage and prepared for my shoe to clank against the second stair. It never hit. Instead, another vine just as slick and swift as the other snaked its way underneath my foot. Then another, and another. Down at least 3 more steps. No matter where my foot fell, it would slide and I'd go crashing down each and every one of those stairs. At last, that's what I thought would happen. As soon as my balance was lost to me, I felt a slimy grip around my ankle, one of the vines grabbing my leg and using an incomprehensible amount of strength to fling my weight away from it. I felt like a fly being swatted with an aggressive hand, as if I was the pest in this situation. One moment, I was staring down at my feet, and the next, I was looking at the ground as I began to fall. 50 feet was a distance I may not have survived. I flailed in some attempt to grab the edge of the stairway, but happened to fall on my chest, pinned over a bar on one of the spirals right below the top. The breath was knocked out of me, arms gripping the rail as pain erupted in my shoulders and my elbows from holding up my weight. I kicked my legs upwards, wrapping them around the closest bar I could find until I was clinging to the edge. The endless forest was in front of me, and all I saw at first was a sea of green. That is when I saw movement on the horizon. It was the undulating, swirling, thick clouds of fog slowly creeping towards the radio station in the town beyond us. And for the first time since I had started working here, I could hear a groan on the wind. It wasn't quite a rumble like one would expect from thunder, but a low, whale-like moan one might imagine would echo from the ocean floor. The fog was making that sound, a living thing with a voice of its own. I yelled out some stream of curses mixed with unintelligible sounds of panic as I used all of my strength to pull myself up onto the landing. Choosing the stress of sore arms over a long drop, I pulled myself up, tumbling over the railing and falling to my stomach on the solid metal. As I stood, I lost my flannel shirt on a snag and didn't bother to come back for it, even if it was my favorite. I half ran, half stumbled down the remaining steps, skipping over which ones I could while the ground below wriggled and moved in my line of sight. The same mud-covered vines that had thrown me off the fire escape were crawling their way out of the ground, all of them twitching in agitation. I tripped my way through them, making a dash to the door, but when it was finally within my reach, there was no opening it. The door had been covered from bottom to center in a thick layer of vegetation, overgrown as if the forest had swallowed it in a coat of thorns and branches. Young miniature trees had sprouted from the ground in that short amount of time it took me to leave and come back, their trunks and branches intertwined to keep the door fastened shut. I tore my hands at the bark, the thorns biting into my skin, but with every tug and crack of solid wood, the trees would writhe and snap back into place in a stubborn game of tug-o-war. The distant groan was closer now, wisps of fog surrounding my ankles as it slowly began to cover the ground and grow. But as panicked as I was, I only screamed when I looked back to the door, seeing a darkened face and the whites of eyes staring at me through the window. It was Daniel, knocking on the tarnished yellow glass as he attempted to force the door open on his side. "Get up there!" I screamed through the door. "Make the emergency broadcast! Go upstairs!" He stared at me, shaking his head as he tried yet again to bust the door open to no avail. The stained window clouded my face, making my lips impossible to read. I turned around to see the same trees covering the door had now sprouted at the bottom of the fire escape. The fog was tumbling closer, completely engulfing the trees only a dozen feet away from me. With nowhere to go, I turned back to the door with one last desperate attempt to tear the plants away. I saw Daniel's face washed out and blank with fear with both of his hands on the glass, and then, as the fog wrapped itself around me and the radio station itself, I couldn't even see an inch in front of my face. Dan disappeared from my view, as did every single thing except for the swirling gray clouds. I don't think I've ever experienced such silence. There was no wind, no birds, only the sound of my own labored breathing as the air grew thick with the taste of wet soil. Though I had been facing the door, the clouds in front of my eyes made it seem as if I were floating in some endless waste. It was a sea of cold, heavy air that tickled every hair on my arms and on my head. There was that whale-like groan again. It was followed by the strangest series of clicks, like a tongue against teeth rapidly popping in no real pattern. I wasn't prepared when it touched me. I pursed my lips tightly to keep from making a sound as something sharp and thin grazed the raised flesh on the back of my arm. It was followed by another, then another, like impossibly long fingers or the legs of a spider toying with my hair and poking at my arms. It felt threatening, but also curious, as though whatever it was patrolling in the fog was trying to figure out what I was or what it could do with me. My eyes were clamped shut and my arms squeezed tightly around my body. I can't even begin to describe what it's like in your head when something massive, unseen and unidentifiable pokes and prods as if you're its human toy. I was waiting for fangs and claws. I thought, for sure, in that very moment, I was about to be eaten alive by something I would never get the chance to see, and my last act on this earth would have been harassing a goddamn bird. My teeth rattled as I waited for a fate that was certainly grim, but it was surprising when I felt all presence around me suddenly back away. The ground shook once, twice, and then the world went still again. My eyes cracked open as I watched the swirling gray clouds in front of my vision slowly begin to clear. The doorway, as well as the gnarled trees surrounding it, came into view bit by bit. The curling ropes of bark and thorns began to unattach from one another and spiral back down into the ground as if they were beckoned beneath the dirt. The door was in my sights as the fog all but disappeared completely. Well, as it turns out, I didn't die. Shocking, I know. I don't think I've ever opened a door so quickly in my life. I rushed inside, slamming it behind me, and wasted no time at all sprinting up the stairwell towards the broadcasting room. Pure adrenaline got me to the top in what seemed like an instant, where I found Daniel sitting at the console with a microphone situated in front of his face and the radio lineup back on track. It was better late than never. I breathed a loud, heavy sigh and slumped against the wall, movement catching my gaze at the window. My flannel shirt was still caught on the edge of the fire escape, torn to absolute shreds, and waving like a flag of surrender. It was then that I made a solemn oath that, should I ever see a bird's nest near the fire escape, it can stay. Hell, I'd throw it a damn welcome party if that would keep this from ever happening again. Since afternoon arrived, some things have come to light. I've gotten more than one angry call from the owner of the network who claims it took us far too long to send the announcement for the people downhill in the towns. A married couple last seen taking a walk near the trees hasn't come home since the fog passed. And of course, we made the missing persons report immediately. I've also got a huge pattern of bruises appearing on my chest from the fall, and I must say, it hurts like a bitch. We did call the police about the fingers. They assured us there wasn't a murderer loose in the area, though that sounds simpler to deal with. I was a bit surprised that the police asked for copies of our caller recordings from earlier in the week, and luckily, the rules of the station meant none of them had been deleted or taped over. The only recordings missing was the one Daniel had taken the very moment he lost most of his hearing. Why would our boss delete that after collecting his copies? I overheard whispers of who those fingers may have belonged to. They say the missing girl, Jennifer, was probably the victim of an animal mauling while wandering in her sleep due to a newly prescribed pill she had only just started taking. A sleeping pill. I've decided that when I'm done here, I'm looking at our call records from the last few days. A certain call from a sleepless woman is coming back to me, and I may recognize that phone number if I see it again. I suspect it might match a number I still have in my own personal cell phone. I'll be honest, I hope I'm wrong. There's a lot I need to explain once I know for sure. This is Evelyn from 104.6 FM, and I might take a walk in the woods later.
Is this the right one? Man, it is.
Here's the thing. It's dark outside, the forest is apparently alive, and you want to go out there looking for a dead body? Daniel had been here only a few days, and already he was mouthing off to me. He moved fast, I guess. I shot him a look, expression cold,
I can't figure
as
out
I
what
sat
the
on the floor and
fuck
laced
this
up the
is.
first of
Oh,
my boots.
B13 and 14.
If those fingers were the
Man, how did
only
I miss
part
so
of her
much?
disconnected
Man.
from the rest, there may
Guess
not
I'm
be a
tired.
dead
I got
body.
a lot on my mind.
She might still be alive. After the last time I sat down to write my thoughts and experiences, I ended up looking back at all of the calls that came through in the last few days. I wasn't looking for the recordings, but rather the numbers, something I rarely paid attention to. My heart sank when I saw that my suspicion had been unfortunately correct. The number on our work phone matched the cell phone number I had listed for Jenny, a college friend whom I had graduated with a year earlier. Although there was a surprise I hadn't quite expected. Jennifer didn't call the station only once. She called twice. The first time to tell me about a bird with human eyes that had been keeping her awake for days. And the second time, I heard a woman crying and pleading over the phone. That woman was her. Maybe it's true when they say that no one ever sounds like themselves over the phone. I'm going along with you. Dan was turning in his chair, ready to get up, when I shot him a look of disbelief. No, you're not. I thought I sounded demanding, but he did listen for even a moment. He was already up on his feet, leaning over the console and fiddling with the music lineup. We can't leave the station completely empty. Who are we gonna ask to take over for us? That weird-ass bird? The toilet ghost? Excuse you, it's the sink, not the toilet. Besides, I have an idea. He wasn't bluffing either. His idea sounded silly and impossible at first, but the more I mulled it over in those moments, the more I realized it would work. He told me that we should pre-record all of our content for the night. We'd record the evening weather, the 10 o'clock news, and even a goodnight message, then put those recordings in the lineup with the rest of the music. No one would know, and if it took much longer than expected, we'd simply set up the broadcast schedule to continue into the 6-hour night owl block. I was supposed to leave at 10, Daniel reminded me. He was only a part-timer, whereas full-time took on a whole new meaning for my eternal presence here. It's almost 9 o'clock already. You don't think I'll get overtime if anyone finds out we're just dicking around in the woods, do ya? There'll be no dicking, but I'll pay the grocery guy extra to bring you donuts if you do require compensation. I couldn't believe I was actually going to do this. I couldn't believe I was letting Dan do this. Honestly, I didn't know what scared me more, the thought of walking into the woods at night and leaving the station abandoned, or the thought of going alone and leaving Dan with the responsibility of taking my place. Now, I'm not saying he's incompetent, but I'm almost sure a wild badger could run across the radio console and operate it just as good as he does. He has a lot to learn, is what I mean. We put our plan in motion, recording all of our segments one after another and making a long automatic playlist including those files.
With any luck, it would sound just as genuine as live conversation. By the time that was finished and the radio was set to play on its own, until just before sunrise, Daniel and I raided the closet for flashlights, water bottles,
I read
and a
that
first aid
backwards.
kit just in case. I hoped we wouldn't be needing to reattach any of our fingers, but
This goes
yesterday's
first.
grim findings had brought that possibility up from
That's
not
why they
worth
won't quite
mentioning
go on
to
flush.
unlikely, but could happen. My second trip out into the fresh air didn't feel as daunting as the first. Maybe it was because the fog wasn't set to roll in for a few days, or maybe having an important goal drowned out that feeling of insignificance. I fished my phone out of my pocket, looking at the minuscule number of bars in the corner. Out here, with a wall of trees all around us and a seemingly endless forest through the mountains, it was dangerous not to have some kind of connection with the outside world. I watched the bars disappear as we continued to walk, the wet leaves squeaking under our feet. I don't think I've ever been out here, not this late, at least. Daniel was flashing his light on the ground, then up to the trees
Come on now.
at eye level. I
Damn, little homie.
hated
Get in
when
there.
he did that. I had some hidden fear that he'd shine the light up suddenly and illuminate something terrifying. You do know your way around, don't you? I was grasping at memories. I had left town so young and stayed away for so long that any recollection of playing in the woods was lost to me at this point. However, I did remember returning. There were bits and pieces of a memory in my brain, but it seemed to melt, as if some of those thoughts ran like water straight out of my mind. I was here about a year ago, but I can't memorize paths that well. But it's not as if we can't see the radio tower from miles away. Daniel shrugged, nodding his head and accepting that answer. He looked back at our metal and wooden sanctuary, which sat so tall on the hill with a huge tower looming above it that it would be near impossible not to see it from almost anywhere this side of the forest. I stared forward in the dark, squinting as Daniel moved his light back to get a view of the station. I kept my own flashlight turned off in order to save its battery in case his ran out. But I had to admit, his constant tomfoolery with that damn flashlight was going to get on my nerves if he kept it up. Would you stop that? What? Dicking around with the flashlight. What about the flashlight? I raised my voice for him, remembering the cotton in his ears. You're dicking around with it! Before I could finish that sentence, a sound erupted from in front of us, even loud enough for Daniel to hear through his bandages. It was the groan of an animal, either aggressive or in defense of itself. Dan whipped back around, his flashlight pointing straight towards the source of the sound while I stopped in my tracks and stood perfectly still. It was an elk. Enormous in size, with eyes glowing white at us in the darkness. There was no way it could have gone unheard, leading me to believe that it had been standing there perfectly still all this time. Its antlers clacked against the surrounding trees as it shook its head, stomping its front hooves into the dirt and stone. Dan and I both backed up several feet, but the elk didn't charge at us. Rather, once it was finished making noise and stomping about, it turned and stared at us for the longest moment. Its eyes were reflective orbs, but I watched it blink. Its eyelids were to the right and left, meeting vertically like that of a reptile. Then, with a heavy grunt, it bounded heavily away, further into the woods. I noticed between instances of wondering how close I had been to shitting my pants just now, that it ran with a really odd gallop. It had 3 back legs. 1 on one side and 2 on the other. It was a seriously fucked up elk. Is there anything out here that doesn't look like an absolute abomination? Daniel asked in a hoarse whisper, his flashlight slowly scanning in a search for anything else that might be hiding in the trees and overgrown brush. There was nothing, not even a sound. After a few hesitant moments, we were on the move again, though I decided shouting probably wasn't the best decision to make.
Man, they put these
I was looking down at my phone, watching the bars
in
the
some of
left
the
corner.
worst
I
fucking
wouldn't have
spots
expected
I've
to have
ever
any
seen.
signal out here, but strangely,
Damn, dude.
a single bar kept flashing and then disappearing, as if it wanted to find a connection. I had no explanation for it, but I didn't think on it too much. Of all the weird crap I'd seen out here, a cell phone signal in the woods was the least of my curiosities. But if I could get just one more bar, maybe I could try making a call. How do you know her? Daniel broke the silence after we were sure no more giant mutated elks were stomping around. This missing girl, you seemed dead set on finding her. She was my best friend in college. We had a dorm together, we graduated together, we lived together for a bit. She was generous when I needed a place to stay. And now you live in a radio station. I turned my eyes back to my phone, shrugging my shoulders. I acted nonchalant, like I didn't give two shits. I actually gave quite a considerable amount of shits. She didn't want me there anymore, okay? She just didn't want me there anymore. I could feel the question in the air. I didn't have to look at Daniel to know what he was thinking, how badly he wanted to ask why a generous best friend would kick someone out of their house. Luckily, before he had a chance to speak, and before I needed to think of a new conversation, I saw it. 2 bars on my phone, springing to life and defying all odds against this wild, uninhabitable mountain. I raised my phone up in victory, stopping exactly where I stood for fear of losing the signal. Yes, we have it! We have a signal! Daniel gave me a confused stare before I had a chance to explain. I was tapping away at my phone, finding Jennifer's phone number among my minuscule list of contacts. I'm calling her. If she's nearby, she can help us find her, assuming she has a signal and battery. Assuming she has her phone. Daniel was obviously skeptical why a sleepwalking woman, presumably leaving her bed, would take her phone, but I had a theory that Jennifer hadn't been sleepwalking at all. Something had been luring her here. I had a feeling. I didn't answer him, whispering a hoarse shh as the phone began to ring in my ear. It rang once, then twice, then in both of my ears. Her tone, a basic selection from the Library of Sounds, was distant but audible in my one exposed ear. I lowered my own device, listening to the sound echo from further in the trees. Faint,
Alright,
but
that's the
there. Daniel
Sinaju
turned to the
Stein
direction of my
chest on.
gaze, flashlight scanning
Let's
along
see,
the ground to
I've
find
been
a path
streaming
of
for
broken
about
twigs
2
and flattened
hours.
grass trailing off deep
I've
into
been
the brush.
building for real for a little
What are
while,
you-
for a little over
phone?
an hour.
That was all I said before I chased the
I
glow
think I
of
might
his
take a
flashlight
break,
on
just
the
a short
ground,
break.
deciding that one source wasn't enough.
I want to start
I
doing
pulled the
this
spare
more on
light from the
Friday
satchel
nights,
around my
but
shoulders,
this is a
tapping it
bad
against my
Friday,
hand as it
honestly,
flickered to
for me.
life.
I'm
The
very
tone stopped
tired, and
ringing,
I have a
and
huge
so I
day
pulled it
tomorrow. I have a
again,
whole apartment
desperately
worth of
hoping this
furniture to
wasn't
move.
just a trick my ears were playing. I couldn't help but feel some level of paranoia, knowing that this forest could be drawing us further and
Let's
with,
see.
illusions of sound and direction. Perhaps that's exactly what it did to Jennifer.
We are an hour and 14 minutes through that story in case I decide to continue that video next time. Alrighty. Peace.